Florida Republican Representative Anna Paulina at the time when the death...
Paulina Luna.
Anna Paulina Luna, thank you.
A lot of people know her as Rep. Luna.
Luna, L-U-N-A. At the time this was being announced in the House of Representatives, she shouts to her Democratic colleagues, "You caused this." And let me say, all of these statements that I'm going to read to you occurred before they had any idea who the shooter was, and certainly had no idea whether the shooter had any relationship whatsoever with the Democratic Party or was motivated in any way by anything the Democratic Party did or said. Remember, we saw a lot of these same statements come out right at the time of the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. You saw his ear being nicked, and, they blamed it on the Democrats, the left. Well, it turned out the would-be assassin, Mr. Crooks, had nothing to do with the Democratic Party of the left, was essentially apolitical and a registered Republican. So all of these claims, all of these inflammatory declarations of war, declarations of revenge, telling Democrats they have blood on their hands and they caused this. This is all before they had any idea who the shooter was, what his motivations were. Donald Trump, the radical left, is directly responsible for the terrorism we're seeing in our country today. Is that true, Sam?
You tell me.
There have been studies of this. One of the most recent is just 2024 by the National Institute of Justice. And what they found was it wasn't the left that was primarily responsible for acts of terrorism. Far from it. It was the extreme right, which they concluded was far, far more responsible for acts of terrorism than anyone from the left. Trump went on to say, "We will find each and every one of those who contributed to this atrocity and to other political violence, including the organizations that fund it and supporting it." Used this as an excuse to demonize his political opposition and go after that. Kate Miller, the wife of White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller, perhaps the most influential voice in the Trump White House, said to liberals, quote, "You have blood on your hands." The notorious Elon Musk said, quote, "The left is the party of murder," unquote. Quote, "This is war." Far-right theorist Laura Loomer, who's also a big influencer in the Trump White House, said, "We must shut these lunatic leftists down once and for all. The left is a national security threat." Sean Davis, the founder of the right-wing media outlet The Federalist, said, "The Democratic Party is a domestic terrorist organization whose most fanatics will not hesitate to murder. The Democratic Party must be classified as a terror organization and their members and leaders treated accordingly," said conservative political strategist Joey Maninero. I will go on. Here is another elected official, Wisconsin Republican Representative Derek Van Orden. "The left and their policies are leading America into a civil war." Again, this war imagery. And they want it, just like the Democratic Party wanted our first civil war. The gloves are off. And we all heard of the famous right-wing conspiracy theorist Alex Jones, and he minced no words. This is a war. This is a war. This is a war. Chaya Raichik, who runs the pro-Trump account Libs of TikTok, said, "This is war." Another conservative commentator, Eon Miles Chung, said, "This is war." Christian Hawkins, the founder of the anti-abortion group Students for Life in America, posted, "This is a new civil war." Fox host, the prominent Jesse Watters, said, "Whether we want to accept it or not, they are at war with us. And what are we going to do about it? How much political violence are we going to tolerate? The left must pay. I can go on, but I think that's enough.
We get the point. Yeah.
I think they get the point. It's not just one, it's not just two, it's a broad swath of the American conservative movement. Let me put a little bit of historical perspective on this. Now, I'm not comparing Trump or anyone to Hitler, but I am giving you a little historical perspective in what happened in Nazi Germany right after Hitler became chancellor, but was not yet a dictator. Right after that, there was a fire in the German Reichstag. That's their parliament. Nobody really knew exactly who set the fire. There is dispute. Maybe it was set by the communists or the left, but I think the more persuasive historical analysis suggests it was set in complicity to the Nazis because they wanted an excuse to go to war against their political enemies. And that's exactly what happened. They blamed the fire on the leftists and particularly on the communists. And in order to combat the threat from the left, Hitler was able to obtain dictatorial control over the German government. And we knew where eventually that went, to the most destructive war in the history of the world and the slaughter of 6 million Jews. Again, I'm not comparing anyone to Hitler, but I am pointing out there is a precedent for using an event, even though you don't know who's responsible for it, you have no idea, using that event as an excuse to gain more authoritarian control, like we heard from all of these statements, to take revenge against your enemies, even to wage war against your enemies. The parallel, and again, I'm not comparing him to Hitler. That's not the point. The point is this kind of event can be an excuse for moving towards authoritarianism, to wreak violence and revenge upon your political enemies, as we saw in the aftermath of the Reichstag Fire of 1933. You know, I did mention the National Institute of Justice study from 2024. I paraphrase, but I want to quote it. Quote, "Militant, nationalistic, white supremacist, violent extremism has increased in the United States. In fact, the number of far-right attacks continues to outpace all other types of terrorism and domestic violent extremism." That includes extremist Islamicists. Since 1990, far-right extremists have committed far more ideologically motivated homicides than far-left or radical Islamist extremists. This includes 227 events that took more than 520 lives. Keep those numbers in mind. 227, 520. In the same period, far-left extremists committed 42 ideologically motivated events that took 78 lives. By my math, 227 is more than 5 times, isn't that right, Sam? 42. And 520 is more than 6 times 78. So it's not as if it's a close call between left-wing and right-wing extremism. Now, I want to conclude by saying, look, I feel very sad when anyone is murdered. As I said, I don't know Charlie Kirk, but my heart goes out to his family, his friends, anyone who knew him and loved him. But there is a separate point from the mourning of him, and that is celebrating his life. That doesn't denigrate him at all, but the right wants to celebrate him as a hero. Donald Trump is even talking about giving him the Medal of Freedom, you know, the highest civilian war award that anyone can get. I would suggest to you that this is not a life to be celebrated. And I'm not going to give you a lot of rhetoric. I'm not going to give you even my opinion. I'm just going to read to you what Charlie Kirk himself has said over the years and let you draw your own conclusions. When it comes to gun deaths, and we talked a lot about that, quote, and I'm always quoting from him, from Charlie Kirk, it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights. That is a prudent deal. Just before he was terribly murdered, he was asked how many mass shooters in the last 10 years have been transgender Americans. Too many, Kirk responded. Kirk called Martin Luther King, quote unquote, awful and quote unquote, not a good person. And this is what he said about the Civil Rights Act of 1964, that after nearly 100 years, finally at least substantially mitigated Jim Crow discrimination. This is Charlie Kirk on the Civil Rights Act. Quote, I have a very, very radical view on this, but I can defend it, and I've thought about it. We made a huge mistake when we passed the Civil Rights Act of the 1960s. Here's something he said on abortion. Quote, it's a growing consensus in the pro-life world that abortion is never medically necessary. He was asked if someone raped his hypothetical 10-year-old daughter, would he want the child to be born? Quote, the answer is yes, the baby would be delivered. And I'm going to go on. He said, young women today don't value having children. Trump voters, though, young men, they want family, children, and legacy. Young women who voted for Kamala Harris, they want only careerism, consumerism, and loneliness. In commenting on the engagement between Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, he said, quote, I encouraged her to reject feminism. Submit to your husband, Taylor. You're not in charge. I can't wait to go to a Taylor Kelce concert. You've got to change your name. If not, you don't really mean it. He posted a video saying, quote, no, Israel is not starving Gazans. During the pandemic, he said, quote, with the China virus spreading across the globe, the U.S. stands a chance only if we control our own borders. He went on to say vaccine mandate is, quote, an apartheid-style open-air hostage situation. On race, if I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified. If you're a WNBA pot-smoking black lesbian, do you get better treated than a United States Marine? Happening all the time in urban America. Prowling blacks go around for fun to go target white people. That's a fact. It's happening more and more. If I'm dealing with someone in customer service who's a moronic black woman, I wonder if she is there because of her excellence, or is she there because affirmative action? Quote, we need to have a Nuremberg-style trial, which is the trial to the worst of the Nazis. We need to have a Nuremberg-style trial for every gender-affirming clinic doctor. We need it immediately. Finally, the great replacement theory. Remember, that's what the neo-Nazis at Charlottesville were shouting. Quote, the great replacement strategy, which is well underway every single day on our southern border, is a strategy to replace white rural America with something different. You can decide, and this is not obviously a full panoply of things he said on these controversial topics, but I leave it to you to decide for yourself whether this, despite, mourning the tragedy, whether this is a life that we should be celebrating and held out as an exemplar to all of the young people in America. Thanks for watching our video, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and become a member today.